Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. I am your host, Muriel Gier, ever and always unshaved and unkempt. And this is why I am an anti-feminist, part 2. Growing up in a culture that has got feminism running through its veins and its putrid sewage systems is a dreadful thing. This dominant ideology, this serpent cult, has infiltrated and demanded control of just about every facet of society. It slithered and wormed and crawled into our collective consciousness, a viral infection, an inflammation of the brain cells, presenting itself as a noble truth, as the one and as the only. In so doing, it allowed no other voices to speak on behalf of equality, nor did it allow any other voices to speak on behalf of sex and on behalf of gender. It demanded, and it were delivered, the monopoly on the topic, to such an extent that we who grew up with this dominant cultural narrative, this deified ideology, were forced to have its message tattooed on the inside of our eyelids so that we should never forget but always repeat its perverse mating call. Throughout all my life, this ideology has been there, running wild and unchallenged. It was not until I got older, until I suffered a medicinally induced psychosis that tore my entire being apart, that I managed to gaze above and beyond the lies and see the beast for what it is. That is the power of political indoctrination. That is the power of allowing one set of beliefs to be told and thought and retaught as truth and fact unchallenged. I remember being told in school that sex, that gender, was nothing but a social construct. I also remember being told that there was something wrong with men, and therefore by extension myself. All the flaws and all the faults of the world was the doing of men, not of women. I write about this sometimes. It is not popular, and it is often dismissed as lies and bullshit by the voices that say we must #believe women without a sliver of a doubt. That it is dismissed is fair enough, I suppose, as that which is asserted without evidence can be dismissed without evidence. This dismissal is also the reason I don't write about it all that often. It is difficult to write about due to the gravity of the situation and the impact this shit has had on me on a deeply personal psychological level. And it is even more difficult when I know it to be nothing but a cunt tear away from dismissal and ridicule from the feminist forces that claim to care for the sexes equally. Childhood damage is as childhood damage does, and to experience this being dismissed offhand as lies and bullshit is not exactly easy, though it is to be expected. Feminism does not take prisoners, and it sure as all hell does not take criticism. The notion that women are completely innocent and incapable of wrongdoing lies at the beating, festering canker sore that is feminism, as do the notion that men are absolutely guilty and mainly capable of doing wrong. Strange that, if there are no differences between the genders and gender does not exist. Of course, the feminist hive mind has got some manner of mumbo-jumbo to explain this away. It has got all to do with socialization and all that jazz, you know, which means that men must unlearn being masculine. Boys need to be untaught their boyness. Social engineering, in other words. The feminine is the state of nature one should aspire to, not the masculine, despite both being social constructs. Strange, weird, and peculiar. Try this with any other group in society and see how far you get. To put it another way, we must unteach the homosexuals their homosexuality, which have been tried and, luckily, found to be complete and utter insanity. Well, for most of society. Some stupidity still linger. If a man, any one individual man, does something wrong and winds up in the news, this is a shining example from feminism that there is something wrong with men. And the might and awful feminist influencers see no qualms in using a tragedy to further their narrative, never minding those that suffered as a result of this tragedy. As long as it is a man that did something horrendous, scoring cheap political points on his actions and his victims is quite alright. After yet another tragic Islamic terror attack over here in Europe land some years back, the national broadcasting media machine of Norway, it functions much the same as the BBC, saw fit to publish an article wherein men and masculinity were to blame for these Islamic terror attacks. Not the ideology of Islam, but men and masculinity were to blame. Strange. One would believe that blaming characteristics one are born with and cannot do anything about, that is one's sex, would be worse than blaming a set of ideas which one chooses to follow. One would think to label it sexist that a sex is blamed instead of the ideology. But that is not how it works in the topsy-turvy blubbermouths of feminist stupidity. For in their mumbo-jumbo voodoo, they have decided that one can only ever be sexist towards women. Something power, something bullshit. Any criticism of Islam as an ideology or as a religion is met with harsh calls of racism and Islamophobia and other such nonsense. That criticism of Islam is racist is pure absurd nonsense, of course, considering that Islam is not a race nor a genetic population, but a set of ideas. And nothing should be above criticism. And Islam is included in this. Yet feminism, or intersectional feminism, in its infinite wisdom, has seen fit to take Islam under its wing and protect it from criticism. So blaming the ideology of Islam for making Islamist extremists commit acts of terrorism in the name of jihad and Islam is xenophobic, horribly bigoted, racist, and so forth and so on. Blaming men, the entire goddamn sex, for these terror attacks that are done not in the name of men but in the name of Islam is quite alright, of course. There is nothing bigoted nor hateful for blaming an entire sex for the actions of someone who is driven by an ideology and not his sex. It astonishing me. The hoops and mental loops. These are the same forces that tell us that stereotyping and generalizing based on sex and gender is wrong. This, however, only ever apply if women are the ones being subjected to the stereotyping. Stereotyping of men is a-okay. This to such an extent that being a man overrides the guilt of the ideology that man subscribes to where terror attacks are concerned. A set of extremist ideas that have told a man that he must kill in the name of God is less to blame than him being a man. Which is amazing. It is constant and chronic doublespeak. One rule for me, another for thee. In the world of feminism, men and women are not held to the same standards. One could argue the case that this is not exclusive to the world of feminism, of course, as women always do, always have, and always will be getting excuses for their bad behavior should they do something bad. Men do something bad, it is because they are men. Women do something bad, it is because of men. Women tend to not be held to account for their behavior in the same way that men are. This is innate to our nature, it seems, but it is weaponized by feminism. For example, how many times have you heard anyone claim that a woman must have done something to deserve it when suffering domestic violence? And how openly? Articles about men being abused by their significant other tend to be flooded with these kind of comments. I remember reading one article about a woman amputating her husband's penis. The comments celebrated her, cheered her on, and stated that he must have done something. Others said that it was glorious. And what is more frightening is that this was not the same incident as the one Sharon Osbourne giggled, ridiculed and celebrated on goddamn daytime fucking television. Separate incidents of genital amputation celebrated by women, and yet these cretins claim that men do not experience less empathy in society. It seems that a man being abused by his partner, then, is a source of amusement, to men as well as women, though particularly to women, especially in cases of genital amputation or mutilation. How strange that men do not come forward when abused by their partners, eh? The assumption is that he did something and she retaliated. Deny and reverse victim order. Now, of course, people are incapable of believing women to be abusers and men to be abused, which is another damned pickle. Despite the insistence that there are no biological differences between men and women, men's greater strength is given as evidence that women cannot abuse men, which is flat out ridiculous and a bald-faced lie. And very interesting coming from the mouths of those that claim that there are no biological differences between men and women. Boys are taught at a very young age that they must never ever under any circumstances hit a girl. Girls are not taught the same. A man hitting a woman in self-defense is a bastard as viewed through the nonsensical imbecility of society. Granted, I don't think people should be hitting each other at all, but one should be free to defend oneself when attacked, no matter the sex of the attacker. I don't often talk about this, but I will tell this story in short, since it is relevant to this topic. It will more likely than not be the first and last time I talk about it. I was in a relationship once where I was abused, when I was in my early 20s. It began with severe emotional manipulation, love bombing and all that stuff. This was followed by fits of extreme jealousy and emotional abuse, to such an extent that she kept track of my every move. No matter what I did, I had to check in with her every 10 minutes or so through my cell phone, if I was not in her immediate vicinity. If I did not, or if I was talking on the phone with someone else, she sent SMS after SMS until I replied. I once was on the telephone with a friend of mine, and when I hung up I saw I had received 20-something messages from her, This was a relatively short phone call, maybe 10 or 15 minutes. The messages got more and more frantic and accusatory. She believed that I was with some other woman, that I was cheating on her, that I was ignoring her, and so forth and so on. If I did not reply quickly enough, there would be hell to pay. Luckily, we did not live together. The relationship lasted a little more than 6 months. After a while, things got physical, and the amount of control she held over my actions were extreme. I ended it after a while when I was out of town. While I was out of town, I attended a party where an ex-girlfriend of mine also happened to be. This was purely coincidental. As would be expected, I got heaps of text messages during my being out of town, and particularly during this party. She was wondering who was at the party, and when she learned that my ex was there, all hell broke loose. After a good and long while of whining and bitching and moaning and complaining, she managed to convince herself that I had gotten my ex pregnant and flooded me with text messages about this absolutely nonsensical and hysterical fantasy of hers. The reason? My ex didn't drink. So of course, this had to mean that she was pregnant, not that she did not like getting drunk. She was absolutely convinced of this. This all happened in the span of an hour or so, and so I ended it. Which led to about a year of stalking, scary fucking harassment, constant phone calls, text messages, and all manner of vile behavior that sent me into a spiral of depression and anxiety that was only alleviated when she found another poor bastard to pair up with. She tried to get me jealous a few times after this new victim of hers was found, which of course did not work. Then she stopped. Now, were the genders reversed in this, feminism would undoubtedly use this as an excuse for the victim to hate the opposite sex. Of course she hates and distrusts men. She has had horrible experiences with men. I had this terrible experience with this one woman, and I do not hate all women on account of it. Nor do I distrust them, because that would be goddamned foolish. This was the actions of one woman, not all women. Oddly enough, I do not believe I would be given any excuses if I did in fact hate and distrust women based on this one experience. Strange how that works. Now, I abhor and distrust feminism. But that is not women, that is feminism. I now know that I keep repeating this point. I believe and I hope that it will make this fact sink in. That is, feminism does not equal women, it equals feminism, and that is that. It is this constant downplaying of actions and of responsibility if a woman does something bad, this celebration of male pain and suffering presented as scoring a goal for the sisterhood, this blaming and demonizing of men and masculinity, the inability to understand that men and women both have their shadow, their darkness, that is exclusive to them, that manifest in different ways for the simple reason that we are different. The feminine shadow is celebrated, the masculine is not. Women deserve their revenge, as they say, so all manner of disgusting and vile behavior is, must and always will be expected, respected and tolerated. Otherwise, you just hate women and wish to chain them to the kitchen sink to cook dinner, birth children and whatever and what not. Feminism may talk the talk, but it does not walk the walk. Equal treatment of the sexes would mean acknowledging the capacity of both for good as well as bad. This is something feminism does not do. Feminism acknowledges only the dark where men and masculinity are concerned, and acknowledges only the light where women and femininity are concerned. Worse still, it depends upon the kindness and decency of every man to help save every woman from the horrors of every man. Implicit in this call on men to help save women from men is the knowledge that men are, at heart, good, which will never be acknowledged in words by the hive mind, of course, but which is shown as the frail and frantic forces of fragile feminist femininity call upon men to fix everything whilst at the same time blaming men for fucking everything up. It is a game where the rules are written in such a way that men cannot possibly win. One would not be amiss if one would assume this to be the point of the exercise. And as long as feminism are the only ones allowed to write the rules, it will not change. We, our societies, allowed this to happen by allowing one ideology to go unchecked. We allowed the smearing of opposition, allowed the lies and filth and fury to become mainstream. We turned our cheeks and looked the other way as boys and men were demonized, pushed out of this and pushed out of that until only the voices of feminism were heard, until only the plight of women, such as feminism saw it, were heard. We allowed a society to claim that a quest for equality begins and ends with only the one, neglecting the other. And that is only the one as seen through the eyes of an ism that has at the root of its beliefs the idea that men, all men, are wicked oppressors of women, that all men hate all women, thus allowing feminism to hate men, allowing women to hate men, manufacturing a nonsensical bullshit gender war that does nothing but ruin cooperation and love and honor and respect that should be there between the sexes and should go both ways. In the land of feminism, gender means women, sex means women, gender equality means women must get all. Feminism made it so that the voices of men are not heard when it comes to issues predominantly affecting boys and men. It made it impossible to speak on behalf of boys and men without simultaneously taking girls and women into account. And what is worse, feminism proposes to speak on behalf of boys and men. They decided that their ideas on sex and on gender also include men, that they, by excluding boys and men from the conversation, are including boys and men in the conversation. As long as only feminism is allowed to speak on behalf of boys and men, as if they and they alone know what it's like to be a boy, to be a man. This they do by demanding boys unlearn their boyishness, men unlearn their manliness. Because feminism, according to feminism, help men too. Except when it does not and feminism says that they are for women, not for men. It is that double speak again, that nonsensical stream of babble. Helping women would help men, and so we should only help women. Trickle-down equality. And regarding issues where men undoubtedly suffer more, such as suicide, dropping out of education, homelessness, alcohol and substance abuse, etc., etc., feminism says that we must not turn it into a gendered issue, but must help both sexes, because it does not need to be gendered unless women can be made out to suffer more. If women predominantly suffer something, it is a gendered issue. If men predominantly suffer something, it is not a gendered issue. This comes from the mouths and clucking tongues of those that insist everything has to be a gendered issue. But more on this later, I think. Here endeth part 2 of my cruel and unusual rambling. Part 3 comes, lest I be sent to the gulags for hate speech most foul, next week. Thank you very much for watching. Here follows an outro most befitting a video of this nature, a blatant attempt at virtual panhandling. Should you wish to support this channel, as well as my blog and any further endeavors this strange path will take me on, there are a few ways you can do that. The easiest would be to like, share and subscribe, as well as clicking the sometimes functional notification bell. Having the message, such as it is, manspread and mansplained far and wide will do wonders. You could also support my rambling and barely contained insanity by buying my books, which are linked below. More books will be made available as time allows. I also have a Redbubble shop, linked below, where you can buy prints in various forms of some of the artwork presented in my videos. Or you can contact me through the contact form on my blog for original artwork, commissions or prints direct from the source, so to speak. Until next time, I am your humble bearded bard, Morea Legier, manspreading majestically beneath the steel sky of doom.